Hello, and welcome to Subtle Historian for Sleep. Tonight, our voyage takes us to the warm turquoise waters of the Caribbean. During a brief but legendary time known as the Golden Age of Piracy, find a place where you can rest completely. Allow the weight of your body to settle, your muscles to soften. Let the world around you grow quiet, and in its place, imagine the gentle, endless motion of the sea. There is nothing to do now, but to breathe with the rhythm of the tide, and to let the story carry you away. The word pirate conjures vivid images passed down through centuries of stories of swashbuckling heroes, chests overflowing with gold doubloons, and the freedom of the open sea. But these are legends. The reality for those who lived this life was something else entirely. It was a life far more grim, mundane, and desperate than the stories would have us believe. Tonight, we will look beyond the legends. We will drift into the real world of these maritime outlaws. We will experience the daily, disease-ridden truth of life aboard a pirate ship. We will trace the calculated reign of terror of the most infamous captain of the age, a man who wielded fear as his primary weapon. We will uncover the true story of a spectacular sunken treasure that helped ignite this very era of piracy. And finally, we will contrast this life of rebellion with the ordered, opulent world of the colonial governor, the man tasked with bringing it all to an end. So, close your eyes, feel the gentle swell of the water beneath you. The shore is slipping away, and our voyage into the hidden truths of the past is about to begin. Imagine yourself on the deck of a ship. You are not a captain, not a hero from a storybook. You are a common sailor, and you are a pirate, but you were not born to this life. Just months ago, you were likely a sailor on a merchant vessel or a warship of the Royal Navy. There, you endured brutal discipline for pitiful pay, ate food unfit for livestock, and lived in constant fear of the boatswain's lash. One day, your ship was taken, and you were offered a choice: join the pirate crew, or be left to your fate. For you, the choice for a life of piracy was not about adventure. It was about survival. It was the lesser of two evils. Your new home is not a grand, imposing galleon. It is most likely a small, nimble sloop or schooner, captured and repurposed, and it is incredibly crowded. Every space is filled with crew, cannons, barrels of supplies, and cages of chickens or a goat for fresh food. The ship has a constant, pervasive smell, a mixture of damp, slowly rotting wood, the foul odor of the bilge water, sloshing below deck tar from the rigging, and the close, unwashed scent of dozens of men living in a confined space. The rhythm of your life is governed by the sea and the wind, and for the most part, it is a rhythm of profound, mind-numbing boredom. Your days are filled with the endless, repetitive labor required to keep your small, wooden world afloat. You sit for hours with a needle and a leather palm, stitching tears in the heavy canvas sails. You work your way up the rigging, 100 feet above the water, smearing hot, sticky tar onto the ropes to protect them from the salt spray. You scrub the wooden decks, you take your turn at the pumps to clear the bilge, and you stand watch. The watch is a long 4-hour shift of simply staring at the horizon. Under the relentless glare of the tropical sun, the sea is a vast, empty, shimmering expanse. For days, for weeks, you see nothing but water and sky. The gentle, constant rocking of the ship becomes the backdrop to your entire existence, a motion that you feel even in your sleep. Your diet is a constant struggle. The mainstay is hardtack, a simple flour and water biscuit, baked until it is as hard as a piece of wood. It is often infested with weevils, small black insects that you learn to either ignore or tap out before you eat. The meat is salted beef or pork, stored for months in barrels of brine, so tough and salty it has to be soaked for hours before it can be chewed. The water, kept in other barrels, quickly becomes slimy and foul-tasting. This is why alcohol is so vital. Grogrum diluted with water is not just for morale. It is often safer and more palatable to drink than the water supply. Your health is a constant, quiet worry. In this hot, humid climate, disease is rampant. Scurvy, a slow decay of the body from a lack of fresh fruit, is a constant threat on long voyages. When you are near land, the bite of a mosquito can bring yellow fever or malaria. Dysentery from the foul water can sweep through the crew. And there are the injuries. A slip on a wet deck, a hand caught in a rope, a deep cut from a stray tool. In this environment, any open wound is likely to become infected. The ship's surgeon is rarely a trained doctor. He is often the ship's carpenter or cook, someone with a steady hand. His primary tools for dealing with a serious injury are a surgical saw, a pot of hot tar for cauterizing, and a large measure of rum for the patient. A deep wound or a broken bone could very well be a death sentence. Yet, this grim existence has one crucial difference from your old life, a measure of freedom and fairness. Unlike in the Navy, your captain is elected. So is the quartermaster, the man who is truly in charge of the day-to-day running of the ship, who distributes rations and plunder, and who settles disputes among the crew. When you joined, you signed your name or made your mark on the ship's articles, a code of conduct that lays out the rules and the share of any prize each man will receive. There is a sense of order here, an outlaw democracy that is a world away from the arbitrary tyranny you fled. Most of the time, the horizon is empty, but one day, the lookout's cry comes down from the masthead, "Sail ho!" A merchant ship. This is not a moment of swashbuckling excitement, but of tense preparation. A fight is the worst-case scenario. A battle means risking injury and death, and potentially damaging the very prize you hope to take. The goal is intimidation. Your captain orders the black flag to be raised. The sight of the skull and crossbones, a symbol carefully cultivated to inspire maximum terror, is often enough. The hope is that the merchant crew, knowing the legends and seeing your ship change course to intercept, will surrender without a single shot being fired. This is your life. A life of long periods of monotonous labor and discomfort, punctuated by brief moments of calculated terror. It is a desperate gamble, lived on a fragile wooden vessel, balanced between the promise of a life-changing prize and the ever-present reality of disease, injury, or the hangman's rope. In the world of the pirate, where a fearsome reputation was more valuable than the sharpest cutlass, one man elevated the art of intimidation to a level that has never been surpassed. He was not the most successful pirate in terms of wealth, nor did he have the longest career, but through a masterful understanding of theater and terror, he crafted a legend so powerful that his name has become the archetype for all pirates who followed. His name was Edward Teach, but the world would come to know him as Blackbeard. Like most men who turned to the black flag, his early life is obscure. He was likely an Englishman who served as a privateer during Queen Anne's War, a conflict that gave thousands of sailors a taste for legalized plunder. When the war ended, the work dried up, and these skilled unemployed seamen became a fertile recruiting ground for piracy. Teach began his outlaw career under the command of another pirate, Benjamin Hornigold, and quickly proved himself an able and intelligent sailor. When Hornigold accepted a pardon and retired, Teach took command of his own vessel and began to consciously construct the persona of Blackbeard. He understood a fundamental truth of his trade. A pirate's greatest weapon was not his cannon, but his reputation. The more terrifying he appeared, the less he would have to fight. And so, he transformed himself into a walking spectre of fear. His most famous feature was, of course, his beard. It was a massive, black thicket of hair that covered most of his face, which he allowed to grow wild and untamed. He would sometimes twist it into small pigtails, tying them with colored ribbons. But the masterstroke of his theatricality came just before a confrontation. He would take several slow-burning fuses, the kind used to light cannons, and tuck them under the brim of his hat. The lit fuses would sputter and hiss, wreathing his face in a cloud of acrid smoke, making him appear to the terrified eyes of a merchant crew like a demon emerging from the depths, his eyes glowing in the haze. He completed this terrifying image by arming himself to the teeth. He wore a sling over his shoulders that held multiple loaded pistols, ready for use. His belt was bristling with knives and daggers, and at his side he carried a large, broad cutlass. His flag was a unique design, a skeleton figure spearing a bleeding heart with one hand, while raising a toast to the devil with the other. All of this was a performance. It was a carefully managed brand, designed for maximum psychological impact. The goal was to make the crew of a target vessel so paralyzed with fear that they would surrender without a fight, and it worked. Contrary to the legends of his cruelty, there are few reliable accounts of Blackbeard ever having to harm a captive. He did not need to be violent. The overwhelming threat of violence did all the work for him. At the height of his power, he commanded a small fleet of 4 ships. His flagship being a large captured French vessel, he renamed the Queen Anne's Revenge. In the spring of 1718, he performed his most audacious act. He sailed his fleet to the coast of South Carolina and blockaded the port of Charleston, one of the busiest and wealthiest ports in the American colonies. For nearly a week, no ship could enter or leave. He captured several vessels and took some of the city's most prominent citizens as hostages. But he did not demand gold. His demand was for a chest of medicine, as his crew was suffering from venereal disease and other ailments. The colonial government, humiliated and powerless, had no choice but to comply. Once the medicine was delivered, Blackbeard released his hostages, looted the captured ships for valuables, and sailed away, having cemented his reputation as the most fearless pirate of the age. Soon after this triumph, Blackbeard's story took a strange turn. He ran his flagship, the Queen Anne's Revenge, aground on a sandbar, some suspect intentionally, as a way to downsize his crew and increase his own share of the treasure. He then accepted a royal pardon from Charles Eden, the governor of North Carolina. He and his remaining crew settled in the small town of Bath, and for a short time, Blackbeard lived as a local celebrity, enjoying a cozy relationship with the governor, who almost certainly received a share of the pirates' loot. But the governor of neighboring Virginia, Alexander Spotswood, was not so accommodating. Viewing Blackbeard as a persistent threat to trade, Spotswood organized a secret mission to capture or kill him. He dispatched 2 naval sloops under the command of Lieutenant Robert Maynard to find Blackbeard at his anchorage in Ocracoke Inlet. Maynard's ships found him there in November of 1718. Blackbeard was caught by surprise, with only a small skeleton crew aboard his vessel. The battle that followed was not a grand naval engagement, but a short, desperate, and brutal affair in the shallow waters of the inlet. Blackbeard fought with a ferocity that became legendary. According to Maynard's later reports, even after the pirates were cornered, Teach fought on. He was shot 5 times and had been slashed by cutlasses more than 20 times before he finally collapsed and died on the deck of his ship. To provide undeniable proof of his victory and to serve as a gruesome warning to all other pirates, Maynard had Blackbeard's head severed and suspended from the bowsprit of his sloop for the journey back to Virginia. Blackbeard's reign as a pirate captain had lasted only 2 years, but his legacy was immense. Through his masterful use of image and fear, he created the enduring archetype of the pirate captain. He was a shrewd businessman in a brutal trade, who understood that the most powerful weapon in his arsenal was the story he told about himself. The life of a pirate was a constant gamble, a trade of immense risk for the promise of reward. While most prizes were modesta, haul of sugar, tobacco, or wine, every sailor dreamed of the one legendary score. They dreamed of finding a treasure ship, a Spanish galleon laden with the riches of the New World. And in the early 18th century, a single catastrophic event created the greatest and most tempting treasure trove the world had ever seen. To understand this event, we must first understand the Spanish treasure fleet system. For centuries, the Spanish Empire fueled its power with the immense wealth extracted from its American colonies: silver from the mines of Peru and Mexico, gold and emeralds from Colombia, and exotic goods like porcelain and spices from Asia, which first crossed the Pacific to Mexico. To transport this fortune safely across the pirate-infested Atlantic, Spain organized massive convoys, known as These fleets of heavily armed galleons and merchant vessels were the arteries of the empire, pumping wealth from the New World back to the heart of Spain. The story of our treasure begins at the end of a long and costly conflict, the War of the Spanish Succession. For years, the war had made the seas too dangerous for the fleets to sail regularly. By 1715, a vast backlog of treasure had accumulated in the ports of the Caribbean. That summer, an enormous combined fleet was assembled in Havana, Cuba. Its mission was to carry this accumulated wealth: tons of silver coins, known as pieces of 8, heavy gold bars, chests of gold dust, and precious jewels back to the nearly bankrupt King Philip V of Spain. It was one of the richest fleets ever assembled, but it was departing late in the season, sailing directly into the heart of the Atlantic hurricane season. It was a calculated risk, driven by the Crown's desperate need for funds. On July 24, 1715, the fleet of 12 ships set sail from Havana, catching the favorable currents up the coast of Florida. For several days, the voyage was smooth, but as the fleet drew parallel with the central coast of Florida, the weather began to turn. The sky darkened, the wind rose to a frightening howl, and the sea began to build into mountainous waves. The fleet had sailed directly into the path of a powerful hurricane. For the men on board, it was a night of unimaginable terror. The storm's power was absolute. Winds well over 100 miles per hour tore the massive sails to ribbons and snapped the thick wooden masts as if they were twigs. Immense waves crashed over the decks, sweeping men and cannons into the churning sea. The ships were rendered helpless, with no power and no steering, driven relentlessly westward by the storm's fury, toward the unseen reefs and the coast of Florida. One by one, the ships met their end. They were smashed to pieces on the coral reefs, or driven into the shallow surf where the waves broke them apart. Of the 12 ships that had left Havana, 11 were lost. More than 1,000 lives were extinguished in a single night, and the greatest treasure in the Atlantic was scattered across the seabed for nearly 30 miles. In the immediate aftermath, the Spanish colonial government mounted a massive salvage operation. Survivors set up crude camps on the desolate coast, and for the next several years, they worked to recover what they could from the wrecks, using diving bells and teams of indigenous divers. But news of the disaster spread quickly through the Caribbean, and the lure of this sunken fortune was irresistible. The salvage camps became a tempting target for the pirates who prowled the region. Men like Henry Jennings and Charles Vane descended on the Florida coast. They did not salvage the treasure. They simply raided the Spanish camps, stealing the silver that had already been recovered. This sudden massive influx of Spanish silver supercharged the pirate economy. Much of it flowed directly into the pirate haven of Nassau, funding a new and more brazen generation of outlaws and helping to truly ignite the Golden Age of Piracy. For 250 years, the story of the 1715 fleet faded into local legend. The rest of the treasure lay hidden, buried under the sand and forgotten. Then, in the 1960s, a man named Kip Wagner, guided by old Spanish maps and a persistent curiosity, began to search for it. After storms, he would walk the beaches with a metal detector, and to his astonishment, he began to find blackened, corroded pieces of eight, washed ashore after centuries of silence. This discovery launched the modern era of treasure hunting on what is now known as Florida's Treasure Coast. It is a slow, patient process, more like archaeology than a swashbuckling adventure. Teams of divers carefully grid out sections of the seabed, using magnetometers and bow-towed detectors to search for signals. The finds, when they come, are breathtaking. They find not individual coins, but huge, solid clumps of silver pieces of eight, fused together by their time in the sea. They have found exquisite gold jewelry, intricate religious artifacts, and even Chinese porcelain, still intact after centuries on the ocean floor. Even today, it is estimated that only a fraction of this immense treasure has been found. After a major storm, it is still not uncommon for a beachcomber to find a single Spanish coin, a dark, worn piece of silver lying in the wet sand, a tangible whisper from that terrifying night in 1715. The treasure is a ghost, a legend, and a very real, ongoing discovery, a reminder of the immense wealth that drove an empire, and of the sea's ultimate power to claim it. From the chaotic, democratic deck of a pirate sloop, our journey now takes us to the other side of the conflict, to the world of the man who was the pirate's sworn enemy. We travel to the heart of British power in the Caribbean, to the sweltering port of Kingston or Port Royal, Jamaica, and into the rigidly structured life of His Majesty's colonial governor. He is a man of status, a nobleman or a high-ranking official, sent from the cool grey shores of England to this distant and often dangerous outpost of the empire. His purpose here is clear: to protect the immense profits flowing from the island's sugar plantations and to impose the King's law upon the untamed sea. His primary adversary is the pirate. His residence is a grand Georgian mansion, a testament to British order in a tropical world. From the outside, it is a vision of symmetry and control, with wide verandas to provide shade and tall, shuttered windows to guard against the oppressive sun. Inside, the air is still and heavy, thick with the scent of polished mahogany and beeswax. The floors are dark, cool wood, and the rooms are filled with heavy, ornate furniture imported from London. This is a world held in a constant, quiet struggle against the heat, the humidity, and the vibrant, chaotic life of the island just outside its walls. His life is made possible by the silent, constant labor of household slaves. The governor's day begins, not with the shout of a lookout, but with the gentle rustle of a mosquito net being drawn back. He wakes in a massive four-poster bed. A slave brings a silver basin of hot water for his morning shave. He is then dressed by an attendant in the formal attire of his station: fine linen, breeches, a silk waistcoat, and over it all, a heavy woolen coat. He will likely wear a powdered wig, an absurdly impractical item in this climate, but a non-negotiable symbol of his rank and civilization. His morning is consumed by the paperwork of empire. He meets with the naval commander in his study, the two men poring over maps, planning patrols, and reviewing reports on known pirate activities. He listens to the complaints and requests of the powerful plantation owners, the sugar barons, whose wealth is the entire reason for the colony's existence. They speak of tariffs, shipping schedules, and their constant underlying fear of a slave revolt. The governor's justice is the polar opposite of the pirates' democratic articles. He signs death warrants with a stroke of his quill. He presides over trials where the outcome is a foregone conclusion. The guilty are taken to gallows point for a public hanging, their bodies often left to rot in iron cages as a grim warning to any ship that enters the harbor. While the pirate's life is defined by a chaotic freedom, the governor's is a fortress of rigid, unyielding order. His midday dinner is the main meal of the day, a formal multi-course affair served in the suffocating heat of the early afternoon. He and his family dine on roasted meats and puddings, recipes from home, supplemented by local fruits. They drink expensive Madeira and claret, imported at great cost, served in fine crystal glasses by silent, attentive slaves. The conversation is polite, formal, and centered on the politics of London or the latest gossip from the colonial elite. The evening is dedicated to reinforcing the social order. The governor and his wife might host a formal ball. The ballroom is lit by hundreds of candles, the air thick with the scent of wax and perfume. The island's elite, the plantation owners, the military officers, the wealthy merchants and their families gather to perform the familiar rituals of home. They dance minuets and gavottes, the men in their wigs and wool, the women in their corsets and heavy silk gowns, all glistening with perspiration in the tropical night. It is a defiant, almost desperate, attempt to recreate a small piece of England in a world that is anything but. This is the governor's life, a gilded cage of immense power and crushing responsibility. He lives in luxury, but is surrounded by constant threats, the deadly fevers of the tropics, the simmering resentment of the enslaved population that makes his wealth possible, and the chaotic, lawless freedom of the pirates on the horizon. He is the agent of a vast, powerful, and brutal system of trade and empire, and his days are a constant, exhausting effort to maintain its delicate and profitable order. Hello, and welcome to Subtle Historian for Sleep. Tonight, our voyage takes us to the warm turquoise waters of the Caribbean. During a brief but legendary time known as the Golden Age of Piracy, find a place where you can rest completely. Allow the weight of your body to settle, your muscles to soften. Let the world around you grow quiet, and in its place, imagine the gentle, endless motion of the sea. There is nothing to do now, but to breathe with the rhythm of the tide, and to let the story carry you away. The word pirate conjures vivid images passed down through centuries of stories of swashbuckling heroes, chests overflowing with gold doubloons, and the freedom of the open sea. But these are legends. The reality for those who lived this life was something else entirely. It was a life far more grim, mundane, and desperate than the stories would have us believe. Tonight, we will look beyond the legends. We will drift into the real world of these maritime outlaws. We will experience the daily, disease-ridden truth of life aboard a pirate ship. We will trace the calculated reign of terror of the most infamous captain of the age, a man who wielded fear as his primary weapon. We will uncover the true story of a spectacular sunken treasure that helped ignite this very era of piracy. And finally, we will contrast this life of rebellion with the ordered, opulent world of the colonial governor, the man tasked with bringing it all to an end. So, close your eyes, feel the gentle swell of the water beneath you. The shore is slipping away, and our voyage into the hidden truths of the past is about to begin.